Cool. Okay. Well, welcome to my talk. So it's entitled "Say No More Than Yes. What is an XY problem, and could it be harming your project?" But now we've actually got you here. I'm going to go and change that slightly, a bit less clickbaity, and I'm going to sort of preface it and say yes, but with certain caveats. So what I'm hoping is by the end of the talk, you'll know what an XY problem is, why they're bad news for your project, and maybe how you can spot them as well. So my name's Nick Downton. I'm based in Poole in the UK, and it's sunny because we're by the seaside. I'm a technical architect at Acquia. I work in the professional services department. I've been doing Drupal development for about 10 years in various different companies, working for large corporations. I've been at Acquia for about 2 years now, and I've got lots of experience leading teams of developers of varying different skill levels. So yeah, my job role as a TA, essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking non-technical requirements and turning them into technical requirements. So I'm designing technical solutions, but also guiding governance. I talk about governance a lot, which is, not a cool and sexy thing for a developer to be talking about, but on big platforms, it's important. My role is to understand the wider context of a platform, and I will guide the existing and the future architecture. And I'm also tasked with communicating with stakeholders. So I'm trying to help them understand complex technical decisions and why they need to make certain decisions. And then my main day-to-day role is actually bridging that gap between the technical, so the development team, and the non-technical team members, so people like our stakeholders or product owners. And sadly, yes, today my IDE of choice is no longer PHP Storm, it's no longer Notepad++ or VS Code, it's Jira. So what is an XY problem? So the definition is essentially an XY problem is asking about your attempted solution rather than your actual problem. So that could be something like, how can I use X to do Y? In a Drupal scenario, it could be something like, how do I place a block to show product info? So it's an XY problem because the user knows how blocks work in Drupal, and they've made the assumption that all content is authored in that way in Drupal. And me as a developer, I might assume that that person who's asking the question, they've evaluated all the different options of ways you can show content in Drupal and arrived at this solution. Well, that's not necessarily true. So as a Drupal developer, I know that we could use views to achieve this as well. And that could be a much better approach because there's a level of automation that we can put into it, and we can set all sorts of rules. It's a lot less hands-on. Someone doesn't have to go in and place a block for every single product. So until I actually know what problem they're trying to solve, I can't understand what needs to be done. So really what the questioner needs to do is reframe this to something like, how do I add a list of my products ordered by most popular? So we've taken that idea of a solution out of the actual question, and we're not sort of pre-guiding and saying how something should be done. So in a sort of software development world where we're potentially using Agile, this is going to look slightly different. We deal in user stories a lot. So all the projects I work on, we're working in sort of Agile methodologies, and everything starts as a user story. And the basic idea is that a user story should be written something like this. So as a role, I want to do something so that I can achieve a benefit. So hopefully everyone's kind of familiar with user stories. And I tend to think that a user story is designed to try and mitigate some of these issues that XY problems have. It should, in theory, stop it, because we have a role and we're saying, I want to do something as that person, and then it's focusing on the benefit that you gain. But actually, we can abuse this if we try really hard. So for the roles, we can invent bizarre non-human roles, or there'll be a description box underneath where we can do whatever we want. We can say whatever we want, and we can kind of break all of our governance that we've put in place. So what it can end up looking like is something like this. So we could have a user story where, as an inanimate object, I want to be configured like this so that I do something, and we put a vague justification around it. So that could be something like, as an API, I want a blah endpoint so that we can blah. And aside from the thought exercise of me trying to imagine myself as an API, it doesn't really tell me anything about the purpose of what this story is. It's configured in a way that will actually just tell us, here's a thing I need to do, and we don't get an idea of the benefit of this. And I'm sorry to say, but developers can actually be some of the worst offenders for this if they're creating user stories. A developer can quite often come in with a preconceived idea about a solution, and they kind of tend to skip over the step of detailing the problem. It's not always developers that create stories like this. You may get a product owner who's come in and they've seen a particular way of working and they just want you to do this. But the user story should be a way of defining our problem. So, saying no more than yes. So there's quite a famous saying, and there's posters and people who really subscribe to this viewpoint of saying yes more than no. And it sounds quite wholesome, really. What could be better than being positive about everything and just going for things? So you search for say yes more than no on the internet, and you get hundreds, billions of results of people saying why you should say yes more than no. And some of the benefits that they talk about, it's going to open more doors. Someone is asking you for a reason, so they must trust you. They must think that you're capable of doing something. You might not get another opportunity, so this might be the only time that you get asked to say yes to something. And actually, it's good to broaden your experiences, try things outside of your comfort zone. And this kind of makes sense in daily life, but sometimes I don't think it applies to what we do as consultants or as Drupalists. So why am I telling you to say no? I'm actually not telling you to say no. I'm not saying, shout no from the rooftops or the side of a building. I'm saying that, some of the time it pays to say no. So you'll get people coming to you with bad ideas. Sometimes ideas aren't thought out. They're not well informed. You don't have the full picture. And there may actually be simpler ways to achieve something. Without being, without having all of the facts in front of you, it can be difficult to say, this is the most simple solution, this is the most appropriate solution. And then the last thing I think I'd say is that, we're the ones that are being paid to be critical thinkers quite often. So people, pay my employer so that I can come and give them my opinions, to evaluate the things that are presented in front of me, And I'm not there to just say yes to everything. I'm there to analyze and make sure that actually, if we do something, it's not going to have a detrimental effect on the customer's platform. There's a lot of trust placed in us as developers, as program managers, and we need to actually sometimes say to our customers no. So yeah, I'm not actually telling you to say no all the time. In fact, I say yes the majority of the time, and it's usually a yes, but have you thought about doing it in this way? But sometimes you do get a user story and you're like, actually, no. So let's have a look at an example of that. So this is a real life user story that was presented to me on a recent project. I've sort of hopefully blurred out all of the personal information, so you shouldn't be able to work out which company this was for. But yeah, this story came about. There was a product owner who put this into the system, and they'd just had a discussion with an SEO agency. And the SEO agency had been telling them about duplicate content. And the product owner had kind of got the wrong end of the stick, but he came over with this story saying, okay, we need SEO stuff, mitigations, and all of the URLs need to be taken from uppercase to lowercase. So he wrote this user story down here in the description. And he said, as a system, I should be able to redirect all uppercase URLs to lowercase URLs so that search engine will recognize one single source of truth. And then we've got an acceptance criteria of, to avoid duplicate pages, the system needs to redirect to lowercase versions of the content URL. And then he had an example. So a couple of issues with this. First of all, it defines a solution in the user story, and that solution is redirecting to lowercase URLs. So that's our first flag. The acceptance criteria just restate what is in the story, and there's no real justification for this request. So I don't know why this is an issue. I don't know, why has someone just suddenly decided that uppercase URLs are a thing and B, a problem. And actually the stated solution didn't in any way solve the initial issue identified by their SEO agency. So there was a mismatch in understanding of the potential solutions, but also the actual problem. So to put this in an XY problem term, what they're actually asking here is, how do I use redirects to solve duplicate content issues? Now we've got that idea of, how do I use X to do Y, when really what they should be asking is, how do I solve the duplicate content issues? So I came onto this story. I was doing review with the lead developer on this particular project, and she was about to bring it into the sprint, accept it. And I said, well, can we hang on and just re-look at this story, because it smells a bit funny. It doesn't sound right. So what we did was we went back and we questioned, where has this come from? So we defined an actual user in the story. So it turned out that it was someone in Webmaster Tools that was seeing duplicate content issues being raised. So we switched out the system role, which is obviously an inanimate object, and we turned that into a real person. We established that the issues related to translations being flagged as duplicate content, not redirects. So it was nothing to do with uppercase or lowercase URLs. It was the fact that we had two English sites with the same content, and Google didn't know that they weren't different regions. So they had a US site and a UK site. So we cleaned up this story and we added implementation details that were separate from the acceptance criteria. So it wasn't actually a redirect that was needed. We needed to add some metadata into the page. So now we actually have this framed as, how do I solve duplicate content issues? Rather than how can I use redirects to solve content issues. So then that lets me as a developer do my job properly, go away, research duplicate content and come back with the correct solution. Okay, so how do we arrive at XY problems? So there's this interesting concept called the Einstein Effect, and it's defined as the development of a mechanized state of mind. And essentially, it's what happens when we let our previous experiences cloud our judgment when we're solving new problems. And there's lots of studies that look at the effects of age, gender, and intelligence on how this, how this effect occurs. But I kind of think that as developers or people working on complex software systems, it's quite easy to jump to a conclusion because we've seen a problem occur more than once. So on another project I'm working on at the moment, we've had a number of issues that kind of all looked like they were related to the file system, and now every time we get a bug, it's like, well, yeah, it's probably the file system. But the point is, it's hard to change your mindset and not let your intuition for seeing something happen multiple times cloud your judgment and cloud your ability to solve a problem. So yeah, it's kind of the opposite of thinking outside the box. It's thinking inside the box. This is our only set of problems, and it's always going to be this. And there's this lovely, English phrase that that I've told to a number of non-native speakers. But yeah, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Okay, so I mean, we've talked a little bit about what XY problems are, but how do we actually avoid them? So yeah, don't just say yes. First of all, you need to think, have I got all the information here? You need to be wary of already defined solutions. I'm not saying just because someone else said it, you should try and pick holes in it, but you need to, if you're in charge of a platform or a Drupal site, you need to be sure that what you're being asked to build is actually going to be beneficial to the platform, and that it will actually solve the problem in the end. So be curious about how a user story came to exist, and understand, have you got all of the context? And yeah, make sure you have proper acceptance criteria that define the scenario and not the solution. So this is a quite difficult thing to do, actually. It's a fine line between scenario and solution, but you get to understand, is this actually guiding the person that's going to add implementation details to a story, or is it just prescribing? So what can we take away from this? So the first thing I would say is that an XY problem is asking about your attempted solution rather than your actual problem. Second thing is you need to understand the why of a user story. And third, you need to challenge your predisposed ideas and those of others when you're evaluating a solution. So these are things that I've always considered throughout my career. I've always been curious about how and why things work the way they do. And actually, I think these are really important skills. I mean, certainly on my side of the Drupal development fence, I think this is what differentiates a developer from a senior developer, a lead developer, or a TA. It's that ability to question, to dig deeper, and to really understand what you're trying to build and what you're trying to solve. And the last thing is kind of understanding the problem space and the bigger picture of what you're building will lead to a better implementation, less rewriting, and fewer bugs in future. So that's the end of my talk. If you've got any questions, then feel free to leave them in the question section. I think the session closes fairly soon, but I will still be able to see those questions, and I can send through any answers to you directly. Yeah, if you want to connect and talk about this, then you can stop by the Acquia booth if you want. I think we're giving out free t-shirts as well, or coupons for the swag store. And yeah, it'd be great to hear from some of you. I hope you're all enjoying DrupalCon, and just like to say thank you for joining.